Over the weekend, hundreds of residents fled Ukraine's southern city of Kherson. The city has faced a recent onslaught of Russian attacks just weeks after people there celebrated its liberation. Efforts are underway to restore power, but there is still very much a need for humanitarian relief, and that includes access to food.
This is one of the many places today we are doing food across Kherson. The need is really, really big.
That's world-famous chef José Andrés earlier this week in Kherson delivering food kits to the city's residents. His organization, World Central Kitchen, has been helping to feed Ukrainians since the beginning of the war. This week, he also met with President Zelenskyy in Kyiv.
People of America, people of Europe, people of the world, winter is coming. Today is already very cold in Kyiv and many parts of Ukraine.
But we are not afraid when such people like José.
Zelenskyy awarded Chef Andrés the Order of Merit, thanking him for his work and efforts during the war. He also presented him with a plaque in Kyiv's Constitution Square. Chef José Andrés is back in Washington, and he joins me now. Chef, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Your World Central Kitchen teams, they've been on the ground since the Russian invasion started about 9 months ago now. I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how many people you've helped feed and how you've seen the needs there change over that time.
Well, we began feeding at the Polish border one day after the invasion began. That was phase one of our operation. We were in every single country bordering Ukraine, in every single place where people were waiting well in the Ukrainian side or on the other side as they were being sent to different cities around Poland and around Europe. Then we began feeding inside Ukraine. Was a lot of displaced Ukrainians inside moving to the west to cities, obviously, like Lviv and other places, and we began delivering also meals in many of the impromptu shelters and refugee homes that Ukrainians were creating. At one moment, we were doing more than 550,000 hot meals per day with the help of more than 550 Ukrainian restaurants. And then phase three is being what very much we're doing right now, that is making sure that the new cities that are retaken, that we can arrive very quickly with food to help those people that they've been sometimes without food for weeks and or months. In total, we've done already around 180 million meals, and this is between the hot meals that we produce through amazing Ukrainian restaurants or food kits, food bags that we create, 30-pound bags that we deliver to the families so they have enough food for 1 week at the time.
Right.
I just came back from Bakhmut, which from Kherson. That was the latest, biggest city liberated by the Ukrainian forces, and the World Central Kitchen team was able to be there within 24 hours, bringing food supplies and bringing water. I was able to join them 3 days after. And this was very much what World Central Kitchen has been doing over the last 9 months.
Well, you mentioned Kherson and one of the most recently liberated cities. I mean, how do you get food and supplies into a city that's been cut off and occupied for as long as Kherson has been?
Well, we need to understand that obviously first we want to have our teams safe. It's a war zone. Unfortunately, we got 2 people unfortunately that died of volunteers of World Central Kitchen south of Kharkiv in the city of Chuhuiv a few months ago. So we take the safety of everybody very careful. But these are Ukrainians helping Ukrainians. Everybody that is in Ukraine, they know they are taking a risk. So obviously, I remember I was on April 1st in Irpin and Bucha. This was also less than 24 hours after those towns north of Kyiv were liberated. Why do we go quick when we feel it's safe? Because, again, we find situations where we had people, elderly, mothers, children, that didn't have good access to food for weeks. Kherson was not any different. 3 weeks before the Russian army move out, or the Ukrainians put them out, and they cross the Dnipro, they cross the river. Already Russians were not bringing any food into town, even more. They were taking any food was left in any shelf of any supermarket. So when we arrived there with food, through the neighborhoods, bringing water because lack of electricity also was something that was highly needed. We created almost 20 points around the city in different parts, so people will have access to water very near to where they live, and also bringing, again, those food kits until the infrastructure goes back, until the supermarkets slowly began being filled again. That's what we do. It's always food in Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine feeds the world, but they are at war. Almost 15 million people are refugees or are displaced inside Ukraine. And what War Central does is trying just to close the gap between having nothing and until the cities go back to normal.
So I wanted to touch on that point if I could, sir, because normally we see World Central Kitchen responding to a natural disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, a storm, a flood. You're responding to a war zone during an active invasion. So how does that change the approach that you and your teams have to take when going into a situation like Ukraine?
Well, in the first place, we went responding to the refugee crisis that we knew was happening especially in Poland and then the other surrounding countries. But very, very quickly we realized that this was a war that was being mainly fought towards the east and obviously north and southeast. And we realized there was a lot of displaced Ukrainians inside Ukraine, and some of the cities overwhelmed. They needed our help. That's what we do. We are an emergency organization that tries to help the cities, the governors, to make sure that they can tackle an important problem. At one moment, we were doing 1.5 million, 2 million meals a day. We had 30, 40 warehouses. We had 90 trucks and 90 trains moving all across Ukraine, bringing a lot of food resources all across the cities, especially near the front lines. So it's risky. We are there because we feel the Ukrainian people are just being attacked in a very crazy way, where women and children are dying. Just we saw a few days ago that a 2-day-old baby died because another shelling just destroyed the hospital he was at. This has to end. That's why we are there, making sure that Ukrainians don't feel alone, that Europe is next to them, that America is next to them. We are an organization based in America. A lot of the people that support us are Americans. We feel that the right thing to do is bringing some kind of hope to those Ukrainians trying to escape the horrors of war.
While you're doing that, President Zelenskyy has thanked you for your work. He's awarded you the Order of Merit. I wonder what that moment of recognition from President Zelenskyy was like for you.
Well, I was very honored, but it's kind of a bittersweet moment because I don't think it's a moment to be individually recognized. I don't do much. It's the thousands of Ukrainians that work with us. It's the people, men, women, defending their country. It's people near the front lines trying to save lives, paramedics, doctors, nurses, teachers that open their schools to try to make sure that they bring the children to a safe haven away from the horrors. It's so many amazing Ukrainians that one way or another, they are all defending the country. Some are in the front lines, but many are behind, making sure that the entire country keeps functioning and giving their best. So yes, it was special. But as I told President Zelenskyy since the first time I met him, that we are here just to make sure that we support the Ukrainian people. We call ourselves food fighters. This is a war that is fighting on many fronts, but one of them is fighting food. It's a food fight. We need to make sure that Ukraine can start producing so the world can be better fed and we all can dream of a better tomorrow.
Okay. Chef José Andrés, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.